Hello, I'm David Chaston with 90 at 9, brought to you by interest.co.nz. This week, get everything you need to know in 90 seconds at 9 o'clock. With news, Australian regulators are rethinking the risks of their four-pillar banking policy. But first, today's dairy auction has brought a small gain, the second in a row, but in fact prices have been essentially flat since May. The gain in US dollars was plus 0.9%, with the key whole milk powder price up 0.6%. In New Zealand dollars, however, in fact, the overall prices were down 0.2%, and that is because the Kiwi dollars found some strength overnight. Volumes sold were their highest in almost a year, although these auctions only represent a small part of the product the New Zealand dairy industry actually has available, probably less than 1/3. In the US, the international distaste for their politics is having an effect on their economy. Tourism is down sharply in 2017, down 4.2% compared with the same period a year ago, and a loss of $2.7 billion in tourism spending. In the similar period of the previous administration, that's the Obama administration, tourism was up 6.4%. Separate data shows that American building permits were up a very healthy 8.3% year-on-year in August, while housing starts inched up 1.4% on the same basis. A pipeline of work is building there. In the US, their current account deficit, which is the broadest measure of US trade, rose to $123.1 billion in the second quarter, its highest level since 2008. That is 2.6% of GDP. We'll get our New Zealand equivalent today, expected to be a similar 2.7% of GDP, except our track is declining. In Canada, they ran a smaller deficit than was expected in their federal budget, but that was still much larger than the year before and is growing after a string of 9 such deficits. Prior to the GFC, it regularly ran surpluses. A recent change to a left-leaning government has boosted spending far more than revenues. Still, the current account deficit, the federal budget deficit is only a bit less than 1% of GDP. Their federal debt is more than $700 billion, however, 10 times more than New Zealand's. In Norway, their sovereign wealth fund, built on the back of its oil resources, has reached a value of $1 trillion for the first time since its establishment in the 1990s, meaning that each of its 5.3 million citizens owns about $250,000. In Australia, their competition watchdog wants the four pillars policy that prevents big bank mergers or sale to be put under the microscope, saying there is an argument it insulates their banks from fierce competition. In New York, the US Treasury 10-year yield is still firming ahead of the Fed announcement tomorrow. It is now at 2.24%. The price of crude oil has slipped again to be just over $49.50 a barrel, while the Brent benchmark is just under $55.50 a barrel. The price of gold has also slipped, down $2 to $1,305 an ounce. But the Kiwi dollar is up today. It is now at 73.2 US cents, a rise of about 3/4 cent. On the cross rates, we're also a little firmer at 91.4 Aussie cents and 61 euro cents. And the TWI is now at 75.2, and that's a 1-month high. I'm David Chaston. That was 90 at 9, brought to you by interest.co.nz.